Broadcasting from New York City to the world, it's the G-Man Interviews.
Welcome. Here to help me kick off my very first installment of the Life After Prison series is Mark Rice. Mr. Rice, a PhD candidate at UW-Milwaukee who is actively involved with efforts to end mass imprisonment in Wisconsin, chairs the Post-Release Issues Workgroup of Wisdom, an organization that links communities across Wisconsin in order to combat injustice. He works as a statewide organizer for EXPO, a group of formerly incarcerated people who drive Wisdom's ROCK campaign to end mass incarceration. Additionally, he serves as a board member of Project Return, an agency in Milwaukee that helps people leaving prison make a positive and permanent return to their community. In 2016, he received a Distinguished Leadership Award from MICA and a Certificate of Special Congressional Recognition from Congresswoman Gwen Moore for his outstanding and committed work to end mass incarceration. He has contributed his expertise on issues like Ban the Box, rights restoration, and crimeless revocations to numerous news outlets, including Wisconsin and Milwaukee Public Radio, The Daily Beast, the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, the Milwaukee Courier, the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, and NBC 26. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the show, Mr. Rice.
Thank you for having me on.
Before we discuss your effort to end mass incarceration and the organizations you're affiliated with, could you provide a little background on your childhood and the environment in which you were raised?
I was raised in a rural area in Wisconsin. I was raised in a town called Belleville, Wisconsin, which is about 20 miles outside of Madison. Originally from Madison, Wisconsin. I lived for the first 5 years of my life on the east side of Madison, and then my family moved to Belleville. I live with my mother and father and have one younger sister. My father struggled with alcoholism, and that caused some problems within the family, but other than that, there was not a lot of problems. My mom and dad got divorced eventually, and there were problems with relationships within the family. A lot of it was related to alcoholism and mental illness, but other than that, it was all right.
What did your parents do for a living?
Come from a working class background. My mother worked for the post office as a postal clerk, and my dad worked as a painter. He has his own painting business.
What were the circumstances that led to your incarceration?
The first time I got incarcerated, I was only 18 years old, and one of my friends just rolled a wooden barrel out in the middle of a road in the small town that we lived in, and I was just there with him. Wasn't involved in any other way. I just with the person who was playing a prank on the local police. And unfortunately, a person hit the barrel who was driving through at about 35, 40 miles per hour. Most people slowed down and stopped and went around. The police came out and moved it once, but unfortunately, that's the first time that I got arrested. I was convicted of first-degree reckless endangerment for that, and I had to spend some time in the Dane County Jail. And then after that, I had 4 years of probation. I did 90 days in Dane County Jail. I eventually got arrested for burglary after that, and I had charges of what they call felon in possession of firearms as well. Because I was on probation, it made it a crime for me to possess firearms, and so I stole a bunch of guns, and I started experiencing symptoms of mental illness. I was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia after I was incarcerated the second time. So I went back. I got revoked from my probation, and I was charged with a new crime. I was convicted of burglary. It was actually armed burglary was the conviction, and so I spent 2 years in the Wisconsin prison system because of that conviction. So the state of Wisconsin forced me to spend that time in prison when I was 19 until I was 21. I got out when I was 21, and I had to do 12 years of probation after I got out. And so the charges were related to me being immature and also related to the disabling mental illness that I was suffering from. I later found out more about that, about paranoid schizophrenia. And some of it was just stress. I was struggling economically. I was struggling to find work, and I sold some of the guns, so some of it was for economic gain. Wanted to make it on my own, so I was just trying to make some money, and then I kept some. I was starting to get real paranoid and having delusional thinking, and so I thought I needed guns to protect myself at the time as well. So that was the circumstances surrounding the first times when I first initially got incarcerated.
You said something happened in 2007 that was a major turning point in your incarceration. Could you provide more detail?
In 2007, I was still on probation, and in Milwaukee, it's a long story, but the Department of Corrections here reincarcerated me for 6 months for allegedly violating a rule of supervision that did not involve a new crime. So they forced me to spend 6 months in the Milwaukee Secure Detention Facility, even though I had not been convicted of any new crime. And I can tell you more about that story if you want to hear it.
You're here to tell your story. That's exactly what I want you to do, so go for it.
About 20 months from the time I was 19 until 21, and I got out when I was 21. I did well for the first 6 years. I did not get convicted of any new crimes. I graduated from college in 2006. I got a bachelor's degree in human services from Upper Iowa University in Madison. Then I moved to Milwaukee, and I came here for the urban studies program. I entered the master's program in urban studies at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and I had a job. I was working as a project assistant. I had a full tuition scholarship, working in the history department, and I did well the first year. But then during my summer break, I was not able to find employment. By the end of the summer, I was down to my last $30. That was about a week before the second year of graduate school was going to start. It was a very stressful experience for me, and I started to experience symptoms of my mental illness. And a few days before classes were going to start, Milwaukee police officers arrested me for disorderly conduct while I was experiencing symptoms of my mental condition. They took me to jail, the 5th District Police Station in Milwaukee. I went to court a few days later. The judge, the public defender, and the prosecutor all agreed that my behavior did not fit with the definition of disorderly conduct. The judge dismissed the case, but I did not get to go home. My probation officer in Milwaukee, who had no specialized training in mental health issues, chose to move forward with the revocation process. My former agent, who was a mental health specialist in Madison, disagreed. He thought with the decision of my agent here in Milwaukee, he thought that an alternative to incarceration treatment program would have been better for me at that time. So my agent forced me to spend, like I said, 6 months in the Milwaukee Secure Detention Facility. And out of the 4 prisons that I've been incarcerated in, Milwaukee Secure Detention Facility was by far the worst. It's commonly called MSDF. When I was there, I was locked down 21 hours a day. I never could see outside and never got to go outside. There was not much opportunity for recreation. I was just stuck on one floor. I was in the special needs unit the whole time, where everyone has a disabling mental or physical condition. There was no opportunity to have in-person visits.
Were you given medications to help you deal with your illness?
Yeah, I was on medication, and eventually the dosage level was so high that it started to make me sick, and I was sleeping 16 or 17 hours a day, and I started to gain weight. That was a side effect of the medication I was on. But I kept taking the medication because I thought that they would not let me out if I stopped taking it. So when I was there, 2 people in my unit severely mutilated themselves. One man in the institution attempted to commit suicide. And in summer, it gets extremely hot there. There's no air conditioning, so it was very uncomfortable. And ventilation's poor, so a lot of people have difficulties breathing. And it's just a form of torture, I believe, to be locked down for that many hours and have no opportunity to go outside or see outside or any of that. And it was originally intended just to hold people for short periods of time. So the institution's mostly for people who violated probation, parole, extended supervision. So it was not intended to hold people for long periods of time. But now oftentimes people are forced to stay there for 6 months or over a year just because of the overcrowding in the system. And there's a lot of overcrowding, so I had to sleep on what they call a boat on the floor for the first 3 or 4 days in the institution, and the conditions are inhumane, and so that's one of the issues that I'm working on today.
How did you become affiliated with Wisdom, EXPO, and Project Return?
I originally learned about Wisdom when I was a graduate student at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. One of my professors in the Urban Studies program told me about it. He had been involved with MICA, which is the Milwaukee affiliate, Milwaukee Inner-City Congregations Allied for Hope. And I was interested in learning more about organizing efforts around mass incarceration in Wisconsin. And so I found out that Wisdom started a campaign called the 11 by 15 campaign. And the goal of that campaign was to cut Wisconsin's prison population in half to 11,000 by the end of 2015. So I decided to set up a meeting with the state director of Wisdom, David Liners. And after that, that was about 4 years ago. And he invited me to start attending the local MICA 11 by 15 campaign meetings. And we're a statewide organization, Wisdom is, so we have affiliates throughout the state. And I've been involved with MICA, the Milwaukee affiliate, for 4 years now, and mainly involved with our campaign to end mass incarceration. But Wisdom also works on other issues like public transportation, immigrant rights, and environmental issues, public education, and some others. So the organization works on a wide variety of social justice issues. EXPO is Ex-Prisoners Organizing. EXPO is a group of formerly incarcerated people who helped to lead Wisdom's campaign to end mass incarceration, which is now called ROC Wisconsin, ROC, Wisconsin Restoring Our Communities. EXPO also works to end all forms of structural discrimination against people with conviction and arrest records, and we want everyone to view formerly incarcerated people as human beings, members of families, and assets to communities. And we're a statewide organization as well. We now have chapters in Milwaukee, Madison, Eau Claire, and the Fox cities, and we're working to expand in other areas like Green Bay, Wausau, Superior, Racine, Kenosha, and Waukesha County. And we're part of the Gamaliel Network as well, which is a nationwide network of faith-based organizations. Wisdom is the Wisconsin Gamaliel affiliate. Gamaliel is in 17 different states. And then Project Return is a nonprofit organization in Milwaukee that helps men and women coming home from prison make a positive and permanent return to our community. Project Return provides many direct services to people coming back. One main focus is helping people find employment and connect people to whatever services they may need. So we have some treatment programs within the organization, but also refer out to other treatment programs and other services that are available within Milwaukee. So a lot of people are coming in. And Project Return has an alumni group as well, so it's a support group for people who have received services at the organization. And many people from the Project Return alumni group are involved with EXPO. So a lot of people who have come to receive services from Project Return are now getting involved in organizing to change Wisconsin's justice system.
On February 23rd of this year, the Huffington Post published an article entitled Jeff Sessions Reverses Obama-Era Policy That Curtailed DOJ's Private Prison Use. The subheading stated, quote, "For-profit prisons were found to be more dangerous, but the Attorney General said they're needed to meet the future needs of the federal corrections system." Now, clearly, the reversal will allow companies like Core Civic, formerly Corrections Corporation of America, to continue to reap huge profits and erect even more detention centers and prisons across the country. If you could have a one-on-one with Attorney General Sessions, what irrefutable fact would you share to try and convince him the reversal will make the problem of mass incarceration even worse?
I would say that private prisons give private companies an incentive to keep people incarcerated. So, I mean, when prisons are built, then that's going to ensure that the private prison companies are going to keep the beds full. So I don't support the idea of private prisons at all. So, I mean, I think that in Wisconsin. We fought to keep private prisons out of Wisconsin, so it's been something that is an important issue in Wisconsin. Back in the 90s, Wisconsin legislators, including Governor Scott Walker and others, well, they wanted to get private prisons here, and then Wisconsin was sending Wisconsin prisoners out of state at one point to private prisons in other states, contracting, and the people from Wisconsin, there were allegations of prisoners from Wisconsin being abused, and the quality of care was very low, even as bad in publicly run prisons. And with a lot of Wisconsin prisons, there's been several human rights abuses, but it was even worse in many cases in private prisons. They were poorly run. So we don't want companies profiting off the suffering of individuals, and it's very important in Wisconsin, where Wisconsin already incarcerates African-American men at a higher rate than Oklahoma, and so having private prisons in Wisconsin would be a disaster, and it would lead to more unnecessary incarceration and unnecessary suffering. And so EXPO will fight any efforts to expand private prisons or to allow any of that to happen.
And finally, there are hundreds and thousands of kids, teens, and young adults throughout the U.S. that are on the verge of joining gangs, selling drugs, or worse. They're also being manipulated to believe that serving time gives you, quote, street cred, or is a rite of passage. From the heart, and keeping it real, talk to them, Mr. Rice.
Definitely is not something that a person needs to gain credibility. I think we need to do everything we can to stop that and stop that way of thinking, but to just stop unnecessary incarceration. And it's definitely not the way to go. So, I mean, there's a lot of other ways to gain respect and credibility in the community, and going to prison is not part of that. So that's the message that I would have to young people out here. Young people will get a lot more respect by coming out here and making positive contributions. And I know in my case at one time I thought that way when I was younger. I thought that going to prison was something that would give me more credibility and respect, but then looking back on it, it was just a huge mistake, and it's just creates so many difficulties after a person comes home. There's a lot of discrimination that people face because of the conviction and arrest records. It makes it very difficult to find employment and housing, and so long term, it's definitely not worth it. So we've definitely got to do everything we can to change a system that is causing unnecessary suffering, unnecessary incarceration, but definitely need to change attitudes as well among young people out here.
Thank you very much for taking the time to be here, sir. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on.
Information pertaining to this episode can be accessed through the links in the description area. Thank you very much for joining me. Now, until next time, stay cool, stay safe, and stay informed.